What's going on, everyone? It's Bales, and welcome back to another AFL Fantasy video on the channel. We're going to be starting doing these content videos, solo videos from myself, a bit more regularly now. Obviously, the 2025 pre-season has started, and we're getting our notes and everything ready because the players are back at pre-season training, and we've got games around about a month away, like match sim games, and we're going to have the actual practice games and community series games, and we're going to get into opening rounds. So it's not too far away. As you can see up there, we're less than 60 days away, only just over 58 days, well 59 days essentially away until round one gets underway. But today I thought we'd go through some defender rankings. So I think content moving forward we'll be obviously doing our positional previews as the Sunday pod as a live show, and then the Tuesday I'll do the rankings of that position. And then on the Thursday, there'll be a bit of a bonus video, just some little bit of extra content with a special guest each week moving forward. So looking forward to that on Thursdays, you guys will see. I'll give a bit of a preview at that towards the end. But we're going through the defender rankings. So I'm going to be doing my top 25 defenders ahead of the AFL Fantasy season for 2025. Obviously, this is really early rankings. I haven't really put a huge amount of thought into it. I've sort of ordered them in terms of my preference, but this order could change a lot as we sort of get into the preseason. Players could have different roles and stuff. So, but we'll get into the video and I'll let you know who my top 25 defender rankings are. But as always, if you can leave a like on the video, please smash the big old thumbs up there. Let's get 100 likes on the video for the first of the positional rankings for the season. And make sure you do subscribe to our channel as well. We are on the road to 3,000 subscribers. We have just passed the 2,850 mark, so we're less than 150 subscribers away from 3,000. That's the big goal for us to hit before the season started. And I know over half of you that do watch the videos around the channel haven't subscribed yet, so if you can just do a big favor and just click subscribe. We will be providing content daily in season, so you don't want to miss out on that. But let's get stuck into the rankings for my top 25 defenders. So my number one defender in the rankings, no surprises here. I've got Harry Shiel sitting at the top of the list. So 112.1 average from last season. Obviously, we saw at the start of last season, he had that half back roll. His obviously scores were high up. I think he averaged like 125 over the first, just over a month, 5-6 weeks. He was going absolutely crazy. Moved a bit more to that forward mid-roll before the mid-season buys and then thereon, but still performed pretty well. Wasn't obviously as good as that 125 average at the start of the season, but he still performed really, really well in that role. There wasn't as many CBAs in the back half of the year for when he was there. A lot of it went to a Davis Uniacke, a Wardlaw, even Simpkin at times as well. A few other guys floated through there. But I do think a full preseason, knowing he's going to be in that role, because last preseason he was training as a half-back, then changed roles mid-season. I think with a full preseason training in that mid-forward role, I think his CBAs will increase, which means I think that his scoring can maybe take a slight uptick from, I guess, that 108 to 110 average, and he might average that 112 that he's priced at. So he's obviously a guy that a lot of people in Classic are going to be starting with as well. And these rankings as well, you can also use in draft, but I thought these probably reference a lot of Classic as well. But obviously, we're not going to be starting a few of these guys. But Shiel is definitely one you could start with. He's currently a tick under 40% owned as of recording, which is the 13th of January. So something to look out for with Shiel heading into the season. But I think he's going to be my number one defender coming up for the season. Coming in at number 2, I do have Lachie Whitfield. So currently we're going in price order at the moment, but Lachie Whitfield is at number 2. He had a fantastic season last year, 111.7 from the 23 games. Performed really, really well. He was just really that main quarterback for GWS last year. We've seen him do it obviously in the past. He's had a couple of years where he's had to share it with the likes of your Isaac Cumming and Lockie Ash and guys like that back there. But last year was completely Lachie Whitfield's role. Isaac Cumming obviously had a few injuries and moved even to a wing to allow Whitfield just to be the number one guy there. Obviously, he had that massive game in opening round last year. A lot of people started him. And as Mitch from the Ball Boys said as well, he was the only player that lasted in his team for the whole year because he didn't miss a game, played every game last season. And yeah, was just really, really good for us. Currently 13.5% owned. The opening buy is probably what sort of steers me away from starting a guy like Lachie Whitfield. But unlike a few of the guys in the sort of top 6 to 10 range, I think he's going to do pretty much what he did last year. There's no change in role or anything like that. So I still think Whitfield will be really, really good this season, and I've currently got him as my number 2 defender, but obviously it's going to be a bit hard to start him because of that early buy, and he is priced so expensive that is arguably his ceiling. I think he could even add a point or two at best, but I think he could even maybe come closer to that 108 to 110 average and even maybe go a bit lower. But I think he's going to be a 105 at least this year, and I see him being a top 6 defender definitely. So, yeah, Lachie Whitfield for me is a second defender in the rankings. Number 3, we've changed a bit of the price order, but I'm going for Sam Flanders. So this, obviously, Flanders is going to have a completely different role to what he had last year, or what we anticipate anyway. So for a lot of last year, he played that half-back role, and highlighted by that game against St Kilda where he went, I think it was 159, and went absolutely bananas. But we did see a little bit towards the end of the season him go a bit more back to that forward mid role that he had been playing in previous years, and I believe that will be what his role will be this season. The thing is, though, Flanders is that sort of player that no matter what role he plays in, I think he can score. He's obviously got the junior numbers and the VFL numbers to back that up, and I think he can perform in any role. I think Gold Coast will improve, or that's sort of, I guess, what people are predicting. So if Gold Coast improve, I think Flanders' numbers will... Are they going to be 107.8 average? He's got that ability to average that, but obviously a lot of that was at half back, take a lot of kick-ins, etc. So I think it could be a bit closer to that 105 average, but there is a chance he can average upwards of 105 and maybe even crack that 110 because of the pedigree that he's got from all of his numbers in the VFL and junior. But it'd be interesting to see how he goes. But I've currently got him at number 3. Again, another one of these players that does have an early buy. So it's going to be hard to start him in Classic being fully priced at 1.1 million. A lot of these top price defenders actually don't really have a huge amount of value. So I don't know if we're going to be starting many of them. Shiel you could have an argument for, but a few of these guys have also got early buys as well. So Flanders is in at number 3. Number 4, I've got Nick Martin. So similar to Sam Flanders, started for most of the year in that half-back role, but at times he did go up a little bit further onto a wing or even played forward in a couple of games. Had a few games where he kicked 3-4 goals. So he's really good in whatever role he plays in. So it's going to be interesting to see how Essendon sort of juggle a few of these pieces around. Obviously, they've got a few guys back there. You've got your Archie Roberts, you've got Jordan Ridley, Mason Redmond, Andy McGrath. So does Nick Martin really have to play in defence, or with Archie Roberts being more on the team? And you've even got Saad El Hawley as well, depending on what role he plays. Does that mean Nick Martin plays further up the ground? There's been also rumours he's been training a little bit with the midfield group as well. So there's a chance that we do see him. Now, I think it was the game against Freo at the MCG, played a little bit of midfield there, but something to watch out for in pre-season. I think that he can score in whatever role, but obviously if he's not playing that half-back role, I don't know if that 107 mark is what he's going to do. Maybe drops down to that sort of 103, 104, maybe 105 range if he's playing a little bit more up the ground. Could even drop to maybe closer to 100 as well. There's a bit of a wide range of outcomes with Nick Martin, whereas if he's playing that half-back role, he could easily average that 105 to 110 mark as well. So he's currently number 4, and again, another one with an early buy. A little bit trickier to start with him being at 1.1 million and also missing a game in round 4 as well. Coming in at number 5, it's obviously a lot of these big defenders that we're talking about here, but Jack Sinclair is my number 5 defender. He's just really safe. He's just safe and does it every year, but he's the one guy I feel like the community sort of said that there could be a couple of points of upside, because obviously, I think he had that niggle, and I believe he might have missed round 1 last year, and then he came back and worked his way in. I think he averaged about 107 in the back half of the year, so really got going. When he plays midfield or defence, it doesn't actually really matter a great deal. I think it's slightly more in defence, but it's like 1 or 2 points difference between the two. I think he plays half-back. There's a chance that he does play a bit of midfield with Seb Ross and Brad Crouch going. Obviously, you've got Jack McRae will play some of that midfield role, and also Matthias Philippou. But there's a chance that Sinclair could be pinch hitting in there as well. But I do think he will be spending a lot more time in the half-back line along with Nasai, Wang and E. Miller. So I just think, again, he's been very consistent over the last 2-3 years. Premium defender for us. And he's an option that you could start in Classic at D1. I think when you sort of go down this in terms of price, I think he's sort of the first name you get to that you go, okay, there could be 2 to 3 points of upside here. So you could start him. He's been in and out of my side in a couple of drafts I've done. But yeah, I think he's going to be a top 6 defender regardless. He's just consistent, and I think he will do well once again. Coming in at number 6 and rounding out the top 6 defenders, I've got Dane Zoro. I dropped him down a little bit in terms of, obviously, averaged 110 last year, had a fantastic season last year, played all 23 games, would you believe, as well, after we said he wasn't going to, being 35 years of age. Had a fantastic year, All-Australian as well, Premiership team, and was a big reason why Brisbane went on that run in the back half of the year. I think they've lost a few games early, but really got on a run. And Kane Coleman's injury in opening round really opened the door for him to play that half-back role. We saw him, I think, the year before play a few games at half-back, but then they put him back forward. Whereas last year with Coleman being injured, they needed someone to fill that role, and Zorko did more than fill that role. So it's going to be interesting to see when Kane Coleman comes back, how that's going to work with Zorko and Coleman. But that's why I bumped Zorko down to number 6, just because Coleman's coming in. He's not going to average 110, I don't think, again. He's got the ceiling to go that well, but obviously he had that massive 184 against Gold Coast where everyone just scored massive in that game. I don't think it's going to be sort of that type of performance, but he's got that ceiling, obviously, which not many of these defenders do, but Zorko is one of them. I think his average drops down to more to that 100 to 105, especially with Coleman being back into the team. And obviously, if he changes role and goes more forward, then he would obviously drop down this list. But I think with how well he played last year, I can't see him moving out of that role, and he will be staying in the defender role. But again, early buy for Brisbane, you just can't start Zorko, obviously. It's just too risky for mine, being that expensive, and obviously going into turning 36 this year. I just don't think that you can start him this year. So, yep, he is at number 6. Coming in at number 7 is Nick Newman. Again, this is one that's going to be probably dependent on what Sam Doherty's role is. If Sam Doherty's playing more in defence, I think I could bump Newman down a few spots. But the fact that I've been hearing that Doherty's been training on a wing and even some mid as well, I think Newman will keep this role if Doherty stays more up the ground and be that main distributor there. Price quite expensive. Does have Richmond quite early as well, which is quite nice. And the only thing that would deter me away from, I guess, starting him in Classic, and then obviously why he's sort of a little bit down the rankings, but also at the same time a bit higher up, is because every year he seems to go on this run after the bye where he just goes absolutely nuts. He's always one of the top sort of 3 defenders, even the top sort of defender on the run home. And from what he does, I think he's a fairly safe defender you can pick. I think he'll average 95 plus at worst. And obviously at his best, we know he can go at that sort of 105 mark and even push even further. So I think picking him, I think it's a pretty safe bet. He's got a very, very good role. He takes a few kick-ins as well. Just be interesting to see if Doherty sort of takes that role. But if Doherty did, I think I'd bump Newman down maybe a few spots, maybe closer to that sort of 10th mark. But he comes in at number 7, and he is an option in Classic. I think I'd rather Sinclair at a pretty similar price, but Nick Newman with no early buy is an option for coaches to start with there. Next on the list is Luke Ryan. Probably a little bit high from what a few people are sort of thinking of what he'll do this year. Average 102 last year. Obviously, had that amazing patch just before the mid-season buys where he was putting out sort of 130s, 140s, 150s for fun. But then Freo changed the game style, and I think he averaged like 79 in the next 8 games or something like that around his buy or just after. So not great when Freo changed their game style. It'll be interesting to see how Freo play this year. I don't think he'll go and average 79 for a whole season. He's got the ceiling to obviously push that number up. I see him more around that 95 to 100 mark, and I think there'll be a few sort of lower scores in that, but I think that'll be sort of outweighed by those ceiling scores. If you're drafting him, he's that guy that I think at D1 you'd feel fairly safe taking him as well, and he's got those ceiling scores that in drafts, if you've got captains on, put the vice captaincy on him because he's got that massive ceiling. So I still like him as a sort of top 8 to 10 defender, and I've currently got him at number 8, but there is a chance as well that if Freo's game style is not looking like sort of, if it's looking more like what it was in after the bye, then there's a chance that Luke Ryan might go more towards that 90 mark, which you'd obviously be bumping him down a few spots as well. So, but Luke Ryan, I still think will go okay. I don't think Freo will play as drastically as what they did in the back half of the year, but I don't think they're going to play like what they did in that patch where he went absolutely bananas. So I think he'll still be fairly consistent though. Nasai Wanganeen Miller comes in at number 9. Bit similar to Sinclair. We know what his, well, actually more, sort of even more compared to Sinclair. We know what Nasai's role is going to be. He's been playing a halfback, and he's very, very consistent. Only missed the 1 game last year, and that was just due to some personal stuff. So he played every game and was fit to play every game. Average 97.7. There's obviously the chance that he can even improve on that and go towards that 100 mark. But in Classic, I don't know if there's enough meat on the bone to really sort of push him up. And in draft, again, a bit like Luke Ryan, just a really sort of safe option to take. And with the defenders, I think there's a clear sort of tier where you can say, I think the top 6 are guys that all averaged over 105 last year and are more than likely going to be averaging at least over 100, if not, could even average over that 105 marker again. Whether they all average that 107, 108, 109 plus, probably not. They might take a few points down, but it's those top 6. I think there's like another sort of 3 to 4 guys you'd feel pretty safe. Maybe even another 6 you'd feel pretty safe taking. But then, obviously, there's a few guys that could break out and really elevate themselves in the 90-plus range. But Nasai Wanganeen is one of those players that's really safe. You know what you're going to get from him, and he comes in at number 9. Max Holmes is the guy that rounds out the top 10. First half of last year was fantastic, and sort of the first 2/3 of the season was fantastic, averaging over 100. But back half the year, didn't go as well, which dragged his average down a little bit to 94.5. But again, he's only 22 years of age. Bailey Smith coming into the team, I think that means Max Holmes will stay more at that half-back role, but he's obviously got the ability to pinch hit in the midfield. I think if you want that guy that's got a little bit of upside, I think he could be a guy. And especially in draft as well, the opening buy doesn't matter. It's obviously not a huge deal. Obviously in Classic, different story. He's got the same buy in round 3 as a lot of these other guys. So maybe it's going to be a bit more hard-pressed to start him when he's got the same buy as the likes of your Callum Mills, Matt Roberts, Lawson Humphreys, Caneen Coleman, Harry Perryman, Dan Houston, guys like that, Tom Stewart, so guys like that. So Classic, maybe there's an argument that you don't start him, but I think in draft, I think he's a pretty safe bet to take in your draft, and I think he's a top 10 defender. Got him at number 10, and he's the sort of guy that I wouldn't be shocked if he went over 100 this year and really sort of rose to a sort of top 6 defender or even just outside. So I've currently got him at number 10, but I think he's a pretty safe bet there. Number 11, I thought I'd spice up and be bullish on someone here. And I've got him in at number 11 because I do think he could have a pretty good year. And it's someone that I've actually got in my side. It's Jaden Shaw. So priced at $825K for us, obviously in Classic. We've seen him in past patches for Richmond. He's been able to go over 100. We saw, I believe it was the start of the year a few years ago. I don't exactly remember. It might have been 2021 maybe, where he went really, really well to start and obviously didn't go as well. I think he moved into the midfield at that point and then it sort of didn't go as well. But with Dan Rioli gone, Liam Baker gone, even guys like Shea Bolton and stuff like that gone, Jaden Shaw's going to be one of the guys that Richmond are going to have to get the ball in the hands of. They're just as much as possible because Richmond, obviously, we know, are rebuilding. They're going to struggle, you'd imagine, a fair bit this year. And I think Jaden Shaw in that is going to be a potential beneficiary back there. The ball's going to be in the defence a lot. I think he's going to take a lot of kick-ins. And there is a world, I think, where Jaden Shaw averages 100 for the year. A lot of people might say, oh, he's more like a 90 guy. You're just bringing him in and then you can upgrade him after. But I do think there's a chance that Jaden Shaw could be a top sort of 10 defender, even sort of top 8 defender in a world and average over 100. I think that is I think it's realistic. Is it going to happen? Probably not. He's probably likely to average that 95 mark, maybe a little bit less, maybe 90, 92, 93. But I think he could go quite well, and that's why I've risen him up the rankings here as well and put him at number 11, just because I do think he will go well this year. And if Richmond are struggling, I think they're going to have to chip the ball around a bit more. And I think Jaden Shaw is the sort of guy that you can see he's thirsty for it. And I think he's going to get a few extra +6s and increase that average there as well. And there was an injury gain in there as well with that 80 average, and which means that he's down the order in draft as well. So he's a guy that you might be able to get a little bit later in the order, but I'd be happy taking him as your D2 in draft if he slides that late, because I think he's going to be pretty solid, and I think he's going to be really solid D2 for you. So he is coming in as my number 11. Bailey Dale is coming in at number 12 for me. Got to go up a little bit here. I was down the bottom for Jaden Shaw. Bailey Dale, obviously last year had that game where he was played forward for some reason. Obviously Bevo likes throwing the magnets around, and then he was sub for one game, but he still averaged 92.6 and went essentially 100 for the back part of the year after that sub game. I think he had a 160 in there as well. Massive ceiling that he showed last year. And with Caleb Daniel now gone, Jace Johannesson, obviously a few injuries there and getting a bit older as well, there's not as many guys back there to really take that number one distributor role off of him. So I think Bailey Dale is now their main quarterback back there. Obviously, there's a chance to get some attention throughout the year as well, but I still think Bont's the main guy you try and shut down there. Bailey, I just think he's going to increase, I think, on that 92.6 average. I think he goes 95 plus. I think there's a chance he could creep towards that 100 mark and even go above some of the guys that I've said before. And I think he'd go quite well. But there's also a chance he stays at that sort of 90 to 93, 94 mark. And you sort of get what you paid for. So, again, one of these sort of guys that he's going to be fairly safe to draft. And if he's on your board, I'd be pretty happy taking him at the sort of right mark in your drafts as well. And Classic as well. He's currently in my side as well as of time of recording. But he's sort of changed with Sinclair. And then I've even tried with some cheaper alternatives and a few options. So it'd be interesting to see if I start him. But he is a solid enough option there as well. And I've got him at number 12. Coming in at number 13, I've got Tom Stewart. Again, he's just safe. Again, injury-impacted games there, keeping that average under 90. But take those averages. He does average over 90. Was that role that he played in the midfield where he would start in the CBAs and then go back, seemed to trouble opposition, and it was a lot hard to shut him down. So with Bailey Smith in, do they keep with that role? Does he play more that half-back role, and maybe Holmes plays more that sort of midfield that goes back? It'd be interesting to see how it goes. Stewart, I think he's a safe option to take. A bit like Max Holmes, though, going to be hard to start him in Classic. There is potentially a bit of meat on the bone. He could average that 95 mark and be about 8 points underpriced. But with that early buy and that round 3 buy, that's going to make it a bit harder to start him. But Tom Stewart, for me, is a fairly safe option there at number 13. Liam Duigan is coming in at number 14. So again, one of these guys that I think is fairly safe. He's priced at 88.7. That's including a game where he was concussed in the first quarter against Brisbane. Sub 30 score there. And he also had another really, really low score against West Coast in that final round, against Geelong in that final round of the season. I can't remember exactly if he was injured. I guess if you remember that game, let me know in the comments below if he was injured or not. I can't remember, but it was a really poor score. So if you were to remove those two, even if you just remove the injured game, he's averaging over 90, and he averaged 95 the year before as well. So I think he's, again, another fairly safe defender that will be in this list. And alongside Bailey Dale is a few of these guys that you could start at D1 that's a bit of value that might not necessarily be a top 6 defender, but it'll be a guy that can get close enough and maybe average that 95-ish mark and be a fairly solid starting pick in Classic. And obviously in draft, I think he's going to be a solid enough defender as well. And he probably comes down a role. I want him to play that half-back role, not as much midfield. I think he scores better as a defender. When he's played midfield, he has done some run-with roles in the past. I think he tried to go with Nick Dacos in that game earlier in the year. He did a job on Jordan Dawson in the game at Adelaide Oval as well at the start, sort of around that middle part of the season as well. So Duigan will be safe. I'd rather him play in the defensive line. It'd be interesting to see if he does with Liam Baker, and maybe they do the 1-2 punch, and hopefully Liam Duigan can score well for us there. Coming in at number, I believe it's 15 now, we have Jordan Clark. So I think that 97 average is a bit overs. I think he's more like the 90 to 95 top defender. And again, I think he's very much in the same mould as your Tom Stewarts, your Liam Duggans, Bailey Dales, guys that are going to be solid. Will have some good games, have a couple of sort of poorer games throughout the year. But I think they'll return fair enough value in terms of a draft. Classic, I probably wouldn't start him. I think that's going to be overs. You're not really going to get any value there. I can't see him going 100. Obviously, you can't never say never, but I don't think he'll go much more than that 97 if he's going to. I think he drops a little bit. But again, still pretty solid, safe defender if he's on your draft boards to take him there. So Jordan Clark, I think, will be solid again there. Coming in at number, let me just double check that I've got the order. So it's 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15. Yeah, okay, so up to 16. So number 16, I've got Dan Houston. This is really interesting. So he could be a guy that could even rise some spots, being that main guy at Collingwood, but he could also drop some spots. Collingwood are an interesting team. Obviously, Collingwood haven't been a high-scoring fantasy team for a few years now. Nick Dacos is essentially the main scorer there, and then it's a fairly big drop-off. Averaged 94th Port last year with 22 games. As I said, there is a world where he comes into Collingwood, takes a lot of kick-ins, and becomes the main distributor off half-back, and averages potentially 95 to 100 and could even rise up a few spots. There's also a chance the average is around 85 and sort of just fits into the Collingwood system, does a lot of good things for Collingwood, but maybe not necessarily for a fantasy team. So he's an interesting player around this draft stage. I think from 16 through to 25, the next 10 names are guys that could rise significantly, but they could also sort of stay where they're ranked, or they could even fall further. So it's going to be interesting to see where these guys land. So Dan Houston's sort of the first one on this list that could go quite well, but also fall a bit as well. Classic option, I wouldn't be starting him just because we don't get a look at him in opening round. He's got the bad buy in round 3 as well. He's obviously suspended for opening round. That's why we won't see him there. So I'd prefer to watch him in rounds 1 and 2. If he's looking really good and looking like that main distributor in Classic, maybe you can jump on in round 4 after that early buy. And in draft as well, I think, again, opening round doesn't matter. I think he's a pretty safe enough option, but obviously he's got the upside, but he's also got a little bit more downside than a few of the guys I've said before him. So that's why I've got him a little bit lower on the list at 16, but there is a chance he could also rise as well. Next on the list is James Sicily. Now, I was talking about Houston could be a guy that could rise or fall. James Sicily, in a world, could be a top 3 defender, but he could also be a guy that averages sub 85. It's going to be very interesting. It's all dependent on role, and it's all dependent on how Hawthorn sort of adjust and play with the additions of Josh Battle and Tom Barrass. If James Sicily is playing as the third tall back there and isn't reliant on locking down on someone or anything like that, I think he could average over 100. We've seen it before. I know Hawthorn aren't as high scoring as what they were, but in the role that Sicily has played in the past as that third tall intercepting defender, I think he can average over 100. I think he goes 95 plus in that role if he does that. If he plays as the third tall, but also has stints forward, which obviously we've seen Sicily in the past do that. Cal Shadir has been injured in the pre-season. Who knows if he's going to be ready for round 1. Mitch Lewis has battled injuries. Who knows if he's going to be ready for round 1. So they've got guys like Mabior Cho and Jack Gunston, but if they're the two that are up forward and Lewis and Deer are injured, Sicily's probably going to play pinch hitting forward, and they may even play like a Sam Frost as the third tall, or even Josh Battle would become the third tall, and Frost would be one of the lockdown defence, which is probably more likely. So it's Sicily, again, as I said, a lot of range of outcomes here. That's why I've got him at 17, because I think in draft, he's going to go around. Someone could punt a bit earlier on him, for a Hawthorn fan, or someone's more bullish on him, but he could also drop a bit further. A few people might be a little bit scared off by last year and sort of not sure what his role is going to be. Classic, interesting. If he scores a 120, 130 in opening round, I think a lot of people are going to start him. He's got the round 4 bye. It's not as bad as the other players there. Could be an option. I've got him on the watch list in Classic. He's been in and out of my team. Hasn't been in my team for about a week or so now, but he's a guy that I have definitely got on the watch list, and an opening round could be something that does sort of determine if he starts in my team or not, and a lot of it's to do with role as well, so I'll be watching for that in the preseason. And if Cal Shadir and Mitch Lewis are fit in preseason and playing, then it's definite something we can watch for and potentially start with him to begin the season in Classic. Colin McKercher comes in at 18. This is, again, sort of, I've got him a little bit further, and again, this is very, very dependent on role. So he averaged 82 last year, that's including a 2. After he came back from injury in the final, I believe it was 6 or 7 games, he averaged 92. So the upside is there that he can go up more than that. And that was it with the Zach Fisher there. Caleb Daniel's going to be there as well. So that's how it's going to be interesting to see how the dynamic goes. If McKercher's playing half back, he's got just as much upside as a few guys that are before him. But again, he's also got the downside, I think, where he could even fall outside the top 25 if he's playing more on a wing or even as a more of a forward. He struggled in games where he got CBAs last year. I don't see him ahead of some of the guys like an LDU, Wardlaw, Simpkin, Sheasel, even like guys like Powell. Finn O'Sullivan might even get a crack in there as well. I've probably forgot a couple of others as well in the midfield there. But McKercher, very dependent on role. Classic, definite watch for me. 845k, someone I'll be really watching with interest. Doesn't have an early buy as well, so could be someone there. He's got the early mid-season buy, so it's obviously you'd rather him have a later one. But if he's going at 95 plus and in this half-back role, there's definitely a scope that you could even be keeping him longer in Classic. Draft, he's probably a guy you don't want to take as your first defender. You want as a D2 or even a potential D3 if you go a little bit heavier in defence as well. You want to sort of pair him with someone that's going to be safe, because McKercher could go at 75 to 85. He's playing in a wing forward role, but he could also go 90 plus in a half-back role. So someone to watch out for as well. Again, it depends where they're going to play Zach Fisher, where they're going to play the likes of, I'm trying to think who else has played a half-back, like Zach Fisher. Card Daniel obviously playing back there. Josh Goda, my North Melbourne mate, likes him as well. So does he play back there? Do they play Finn O'Sullivan back there as well? They've played McKercher and Shiel back-to-back years back there in their first years. So do they play Finn O'Sullivan there to get him used to run, playing McKercher up more? So a very, very interesting pre-season watch there. But I've got McKercher coming in at number 18. Coming in at number 19, I've got Kane Farrell. Very much like this sort of group of defenders that could go 90 plus and sort of elevating sort of to that sort of top 12 to 15 defender range. But if it's bought by committee back there for Port, which few people think it could be, I think he's going to average what he's about that sort of 75 to 85 at best. Probably around that 80 mark there. I think with Houston gone, I think he will see a bump. It just depends, will he fill that Houston role? Or will the likes of your Logan Evans, Ryan Burton, guys like that, Josh Sin, do all these guys just share it? Jace Burgoyne, do they all share it sort of off that sort of half-back and wing? Or does Kane Farrell become the guy back there? He's at a prime age now, going into 20, I think he's turning 26 this year, so 25 is his sort of right into his prime. Had a couple of injuries to deal with over the last couple of years. Played 22 games, got injured in that last game. He might have missed a game earlier in the year, but besides that, 22 games is good to see. Classic, I'm pretty keen. I've definitely watching the pre-season. He's currently in my side at the moment. I think I could see him going 90 plus if he's that main guy, and that's sort of what I'm banking on. He's got a lovely kick, so I do see him being that main guy back there, but there's a chance as well that a few guys do share it, and which would be where he might not do as well in both for our classic and draft side. So definite pre-season watch for me, and he comes in at number 19. Number 20, I've got Dan Rioli. If it wasn't for the early season bye, he would be a really interesting starting pick and a real unique pick as well. So he's only owned by 4.65% in Classic at the moment. We saw some big games from him at the back part of the year as well. And I remember that game against Richmond, he scored, against Gold Coast, scored 120 plus. Gold Coast defenders have scored well for the last couple of years. We saw Sam Flanders dominate in that role. We saw Sexton go very well in that role as well. They've paid a fair bit to get Dan Rioli up there. Obviously, Hardwick being former coach at Richmond. I think Rioli will go there and be that main guy. His ball use is very, very good. His running carry is also going to be very beneficial for Gold Coast. I see his average climbing over 85 and could even go 90 plus. It's harder in Classic to start with him, and I've probably even got him a bit low on this list as well. I probably should have him even higher than Farrell and McKercher and guys like that. So if I was to probably adjust the rankings, I probably would even put him above those two. But I'll leave him here for now. I'll leave him at number 19 for now. But again, he's got the scope. I think unlike McKercher and Farrell, I think Rioli's going to be pretty safe. I think he's going to be 85 at least and just be really safe. But I also think he's could pop and go 90, 95 and be a really solid defender for you to pick in draft. Classic, again, got the early buy, the round 2 buy as well. So I don't know if I could start with him in Classic. Again, opening round could change. If he goes 120, then you could make a case for starting him. But I think in Classic, he's a guy that you watch the first couple of weeks. Opening round of round 1, has the buy, and then maybe you could trade one of those round 3 guys that haven't done enough and go to Rioli if he's done really well. So I've currently got Dan Rioli at number 19, but again, could easily be higher than that as well on the list there. And there are a few guys as well. Does Sexton play in the team? Does John No will play in the team? They obviously got him as well. So they're going to have a couple of guys back there. Will Power's back there. So it's not like he's going to just have it all to himself. But I think he'll be the main guy back there, and that's why I've got him at number 19. Number 20, I've got Trent Rivers. I do expect him to play midfield more this season. Obviously, played midfield in the back part of the year with Clayton Oliver and Chris Petrarca. Oliver sort of not going as well as he did, and Petrarca obviously being injured. I think Rivers gave him a different sort of player in the midfield, and I see him going fairly solid again. Price 82 in Classic, 841k. He's an interesting pick, and I think he's a preseason watch. And especially if Petrarca obviously broken ribs. If he was to miss the start of the season, I think Rivers, there is a chance you could start with him in Classic. I think with the Oliver, Petrarca, Viney, if we assume that Oliver's going to get back to at least 95, if not 100 plus. Petrarca gets back to 95, 100 plus. Vine will be solid. Can Rivers play in that midfield and average over 90? That's the question. If he's playing a mix of halfback and midfield, there's a chance he could, because he could get a share of the kick-ins, but then also go up the ground and get involved at stoppage. So his role is going to be quite dependent on what he does here, but I think he's a guy that could be a bit of a solid pick in draft as well, and a guy that could rise a fair bit if he does get that real good role and that mix of mid and defence, and fills out the stat lines. Coming at number 21 is Carl Amon. So he's a little bit more expensive up here. Yep, there he is. I think with the fact that Barras and Battle are there, and Sicily, I just assume will be more of the main distributor back there. I think Carl Amon's average will very likely stay the same. If not, it could even go a little bit lower, maybe around the 85-ish mark. Again, all depending on what happens with Sicily, right? If there's injuries forward and Sicily's got to play a bit more forward, Amon could be that beneficiary and average closer to that 90 mark. But I think from what I would assume, Sicily's going to be the third tall. Amon will probably be the run and carry guy of half-back, along with Muswell D'Ambrosio, who will be playing, obviously, on the wing and coming back into defence at times. Obviously, Weddle's there as well, and a few other guys. But I think Amon will be that main run and carry guy. So I think Amon will be solid. I think he's a fairly solid player to maybe fill out your defensive line, if depending on, obviously, how deep the draft is and everything. But he could be a pretty solid sort of D3, maybe even D2, depending on sort of where you're taking your defenders. But Amon will be solid. So I think he will be a guy that you can draft, and I've got him at number 22. Number 23. So these are the three guys that are a little bit cheaper in that 700k range that are very highly talked about in Classic. And we're going to talk about Callum Mills. So obviously injured for a lot of last year, played defence, not that midfield role. If he is playing midfield, obviously Dean Cox is there, so a few things could change. If Callum Mills is playing midfield, he would be a top 10 defender and probably a top 6 defender. I think he would average over 100 if he's playing midfield. It just depends where they play. Does he play a mix of midfield and wing? Which that rotation could work well with a guy like an Errol Goulden, where if Mills in the midfield, Goulden on the wing, and vice versa. But they've already got guys like Isaac Heaney, Chad Warner, James Rowbottom, Errol Goulden. They've got a few guys. They've got enough guys already in that midfield, and we do see a few other guys pinch hit in there as well. Does Callum Mills play that midfield, or does he play in defence? If he plays in defence, it's going to be hard to see him really cracking sort of that top sort of even 20 defenders, because I think he would just be a guy that would average about 80. I think we had obviously Chris on the pod on Sunday night, and he was saying that he's just, take out those years he played midfield, he's averaged around 75. So he's just been really their guy that sort of Swiss Army knife, where they just put him wherever they need him to go. He's obviously played a lot of that extra toll in defence, but he's a guy that, depending on role, could really rise. If he's playing midfield in the pre-season, you get him and you draft him as like your D3, you could have a steal on your hands. But if he's playing in defence, you're probably going to get a guy that will be okay, will have some good games, will have a few poor games, would be a solid defender to be at D3 even on your bench. But Mills has got a wide range of outcomes, like a lot of these defenders here, which is why that I'm not going to go back and sort of shuff my order with like McKercher, Farrell and Rioli, because they could all average 90, but they could all average 80. So it's sort of, they're all in that mark there. Mills' teammate is coming in at number 24, and that's Matt Roberts. And I've probably only got Mills ahead of Roberts at the moment because of probably just the fact that a lot more people got him in Classic, which probably really shouldn't determine rankings. But he's a guy that didn't go as well in the finals, but the back half of the year averaged over 90 and had some big tons in there as well, and looked really good as that one of those main kickers out of that Sydney backline. Had the second most kick-ins behind Nick Blakey last year, and both in draft and Classic could be a goal with a fair bit of upside. Obviously, the same with him and Mills. Obviously, they've both got opening round, so in Classic it'd be, I think, dependent on what his role is, but also what he scores in opening round. But being 21, sort of had that breakout year last year, but his price is down at 76 because he had a few sub games in the middle part of the year. I think Classic, definite preseason watch for me, definitely got him on the watch list. And draft as well could be very similar to Mills. You could pick him as your sort of one of your last defenders, or even depending on sort of how shallow your league is, if he's on your bench or anything like that in draft. Could be a guy that really pops and goes 90 plus, but you could also just average around that 75, 80 mark and sort of just be sort of is what he is while you've got Blakey there, and if Mills is back there as well. So it's Sydney, a lot of moving pieces there, But these guys could definitely rise up the rankings for sure. Final player to round out the top 25, I've got Harry Perryman. Harry Perryman, obviously making the move to Collingwood. I don't think he would have moved to Collingwood if he wasn't going to play midfield. So that's the big watch. Is he going to play midfield? And a bit like what I said with Dan Houston, Collingwood aren't a huge scoring fantasy team. So he's priced at 74 in Classic. Can he improve that average over 85 and maybe towards that 90 mark to be a good starting pick? That's the question. And draft as well. He's a guy, I think in draft he'll be solid. I reckon he'll be around at least 80, really whatever role he does. But he is a guy that could go a little bit higher. I don't think he's got the same ceiling as your Mills and your Roberts and your Riolis and Farrells and McKerches. But I think he could be fairly solid and be a good starting pick in Classic. And draft, I think he'll be a solid defender. He's got that round 3 bye that he does share with Roberts and Mills and those Geelong guys in Holmes and Stewart and Humphreys and guys like that. So it's going to be hard to start all of these guys. Do you start Perryman instead of Mills? If Mills is playing in defence, you could potentially do that if Perryman's playing the midfield. But in draft, obviously, as we said, opening round doesn't matter too much and could be a guy that could go fairly solid for you in defence. So it'd be interesting to see where people take him in drafts. But that's my top 25 defenders. It's going to be interesting to see how that sort of stacks up heading into the season. Obviously, there's going to be guys like some of the guys didn't even rank here, like guys like Jordan Ridley, Andy McGrath, Mitch Hinge. Be interesting to see with Isaac Cummings back there, or if Cummings plays in midfield, does Hinge take more of that distributing role? Lairdy as well. If you draft him in the midfield, I think he play defence, could pick up defender status. He would be a top 10 defender, I think, for sure. So there's a few guys back there that could get defender status that end up being sort of knocking a few of these guys down. But sort of that's how I'd rank the top 25. As I said, McKercher, Farrell, Rioli, you could have Rioli above those two guys. I sort of did, the reason I ranked Rioli and Farrell ahead is that this was a mixture of Classic rankings, but also draft rankings. So I had Rioli down because he's got the opening round bye compared to McKercher and Farrell. But in draft, you could take Rioli above those guys. But the other guys, I'm fairly settled on that top 25 there. And as I said, interesting to see where those rankings do end up as well. So, but yeah, let me know in the comments below, guys, what you thought of the rankings episode and what you thought of the rankings. Do you agree or disagree with any of the rankings? Out of the players I left out, would you put any of them in the top 25? What would you change the rankings? Let me know in the comments below, comment below, and let me know what you would change as well. And if you've got any questions regarding any sort of starting teams or anything like that, put them in the comments below and I'll answer them when I can. Also, if you'd like to ask questions, head over to askmeonq.com/AFL Fantasy Fanatics. I'll answer all your questions there. I can do it in depth. I can record audio and give you an audio response for any questions you have. You can send through screenshots of your team there as well, which is fantastic. Does help support the channel. So if you guys would like to do that, but also get your question answered, then you can also head over to askmeonq.com/AFL Fantasy Fanatics. But yeah, if you did enjoy the video, make sure you smash a like and subscribe to our channel. As I said, 100 likes would be fantastic and 3,000 subscribers is the goal. So if you can help us hit that goal, that would be fantastic. I'll be back on Thursday with a recorded episode with Mitch. We recorded it in before Christmas. So I've obviously did the Holmes files with Holmesy. I thought I'd leave it a bit and then release it, but it's very much centered on obviously being outside the top 100 and then Mitch cracking into the top 100. So really good discussion with Mitch on Thursday. So make sure you guys tune into that. And then obviously on Sunday night, we'll be live again at 7:30 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time and 4:30 p.m. Per time, going through our midfielder episode with a couple of special guests as well and a couple of the usual crew as well. So make sure you guys tune in on Sunday Night Live if you want to get your questions answered. It's going to be a good episode chatting everything to do with midfielders. But as I said, guys, thank you very much for tuning in once again. And I'll catch you guys on Thursday. So thanks, guys. I'm out. Cheers.